We spent the week of Christmas at a cabin in the mountains. My parents wanted a change of scenery, said they were sick of the city lights and overcrowded Mont Santos. They found a place right by the woods with great reviews online. It wasn't far from town, close enough to go skiing, and we could cook our own Christmas dinner. We got there around 3 p.m. after a long drive. The car was packed full luggage, groceries, wine, Christmas cookie cutters, and a whole bag of marshmallows. The cabin looked great from the outside, a deep brown, wooden house with neon string lights under the roof, and a little brick fire pit out front. Someone had clearly taken care of it. The key was in the mailbox, and as soon as my parents opened the door, they started unloading the car. My little brother ran upstairs to pick a room. I carried 2 grocery bags into the kitchen and opened the fridge. It was completely empty, spotless, actually, but the light was on, and I could hear it running. I started loading in the food, putting the still cold steak on the bottom shelf. Just as I was about to wash my hands, I noticed a door on the side wall of the kitchen. It was closed, but there was a faint damp mark on the edge of the door frame, like someone with wet hands had just touched it. I tried the handle. It was locked. Nothing weird about it. I called my dad over. He said it was probably the door to the cellar. Most old cabins had one. Locked was better anyway, so kids wouldn't wander in. That night, it snowed. We had pan-seared steak, canned hot cocoa, and my parents even opened a bottle of red wine. Happy that for once they hadn't forgotten the corkscrew. After dinner, my brother insisted on playing board games. We sat on the carpet in front of the fireplace, surrounded by cards and dice. The only sounds were our laughter and the crackle of fire. Around 11:30, Dad went to take a shower. I headed into the kitchen to grab a glass of water and passed that door again. This time, there was a wet spot on the floor. I figured someone spilled something, but there were no cups or bottles around, just that one damp ring in front of the cellar door. I wiped it up with some paper towels, thinking maybe it was snow that someone tracked in. At 2 a.m., was woken up by a sound downstairs. It was soft, like a chair being dragged slow, scraping across the floor. I sat up in bed. I could hear it clearly. My parents' door was closed, and my brother was in the room next to mine. I didn't turn on the lights. Still in my pajamas, I quietly crept down the stairs, the wood creaking beneath each step. No one was in the living room, but I noticed one of the chairs at the dining table was out of place just slightly, like someone had been sitting there. I turned toward the kitchen. The cellar door was ajar. Just a crack, but it wasn't locked anymore. I walked over. As soon as my fingers touched the knob, the door creaked open a little more, just enough to make a hollow thunk noise. Inside, it was pitch black. I flipped the switch. Nothing. The light didn't work. I could just barely make out the first few wooden steps leading down. Everything else was swallowed by darkness. I shut the door, locked it again, and dragged a chair over to brace it. I didn't know why I did that, but it felt right. The next morning, I told my parents. My dad laughed, said it was probably just the wood swelling from the cold, making the door pop open. I didn't mention the noise. They brushed it off. After breakfast, we went to the ski slopes and didn't get back until dusk. The heat inside the cabin was blasting. My face was itchy from how warm it was. Dinner was corn chowder and roasted chicken breast. We listened to Christmas music while it snowed outside. My brother wanted to do a gift exchange, but we hadn't prepared anything. We teased him for taking it too seriously. Dad said we could stop by the nearest town the next day. That night, I stayed up a little later. At 3 a.m. I heard sounds again. Different this time, more like fabric dragging or slippered feet brushing over carpet. Something was moving. Slowly, I held my breath, waiting for it to stop. Eventually, it did. I went downstairs. The house was quiet. The chair was still in front of the cellar door, but it had been knocked slightly askew, like it was pushed, then shoved back. I didn't touch the door. I went back upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling until the sun came up. The third day, we stayed in. It was snowing hard outside. Dad was in the living room, watching sports. Mom was in the kitchen baking pies. My brother and I worked on a puzzle. Around 3 p.m. the power suddenly went out. Everything shut off: lights, TV, the heater. Dad went outside to check the fuse box. Mom lit candles and placed them on the dining table. I went to the kitchen. And then I heard it. A soft closing sound. It came from the cellar. I turned. The door was open again. The chair had been moved aside. And the door was wide open. Pitch black inside. Like a deep well. I couldn't see anything. I stood there, heart racing, and before I knew it, my foot stepped forward. Just then, my brother ran in asking where the cookies were. I flinched so hard, I nearly screamed. I quickly shut the door and moved a chair back in place. He didn't even notice. Grabbed the cookies and ran off. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking. The power came back that evening. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. I couldn't find the words. Dad started prepping our Christmas dinner. Mom sliced the ham. My brother was wrapping his own gift in the other room. I kept my eyes on the cellar door until Mom called me to help set the table. That was our last night there. At 11 p.m. Dad suggested we roast marshmallows. We all sat around the fireplace, faces lit by the flames, the whole cabin warm and cozy. I just stuck my marshmallow on a stick when I heard it again. Soft, careful steps, like cloth shoes pressing down on damp wooden floorboards. Coming from the kitchen. I stood up, looked toward the dark kitchen. Nothing moved. My parents didn't notice. My brother was too busy biting into a burnt marshmallow. I walked into the kitchen. The firelight didn't reach this far, only the faint glow of snow light coming through the windows. The back door was open, not the cellar door, the actual back door, leading out to the forest trail behind the house. It was slightly swinging, like it had just been pushed. There were wet footprints on the floor, leading in, not out. I closed the door, turned to go back and heard a click from behind the cellar door, like a lock being undone. I didn't look back, just walked straight to the living room, sat by the fire, and pretended nothing had happened. I didn't sleep that night, just sat on my bed upstairs, listening to the sounds below. Cloth dragging, glass clinking against wood. I didn't call for anyone. Dad snored through the night, my brother, too. At sunrise, we got ready to leave. I was the last one out. As I closed the front door, I glanced back one final time. The cellar door was wide open. The chair had been knocked over. The floor was wet. I didn't go back to shut it. I just locked the front door and left. As we drove away, Dad played music. Mom turned around and asked if I'd forgotten anything inside. I told her no, but deep down, I knew. We weren't the only ones who spent Christmas in that cabin. On Christmas Eve, the hospital felt like a ghost town sealed under glass. The lights weren't exactly dim, but the longer you looked, the emptier everything felt. The hallway stretched on in silence, broken only by the steady hum of the heater. I sat behind the nurse's station with a cup of still steaming coffee, a few charts stacked on the desk. No one was rushing me. No one was asking questions. There weren't many patients tonight, and most of the doctors had already gone home. I was the one who stayed behind, not for the higher holiday pay, but because spending Christmas with a bunch of machines that don't talk felt easier. No one asking why you didn't go home, no gift exchanges. No one saying Merry Christmas. I could hear laughter from the nurses' lounge, Angela and Laura unwrapping chocolate cookies. I didn't join them, but just hearing them through the wall made the place feel less dead. A little before 11, an alert went off on the 4th floor. Not the urgent beep 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 of a code, just the soft chime that signals someone getting out of bed. It was brief, but unmistakable. I checked the security monitor. It was coming from the last room, down the whole room, 403. 403 was empty. No patients had been assigned there all week. I stood up, grabbed the walkie, and called for security to meet me upstairs, then headed for the elevator. It was slow, so I took the stairs. The higher I climbed, the dimmer the hallway lights got. On the 4th floor, everything was quiet. Doors along the hallway were shut tight, windows taped with Christmas decals. I checked each room number, walking slowly toward 403. The alert sounded again. Same soft tone, same duration. The door to 403 wasn't fully closed. A narrow crack was left open. I pushed it gently. The lights were off, but moonlight spilled through the window, bathing the room in a faint blue. Sitting on the edge of the bed was a girl, thin, small, wearing a pale blue hospital gown. Her hair was a little messy, her legs dangling off the side of the bed. I asked where she came from, what she was doing here. She didn't answer, just stared out the window, her feet swinging slightly. She wasn't shaking. She didn't cry. She just sat there. I stepped inside. As soon as my foot crossed the threshold, the overhead lights flicked on by themselves. Harsh and sudden. I blinked, and when my eyes adjusted, she was gone. Just then, security walked in. He saw me standing there and asked, "You call me?" I told him the alert in 403 went off twice, but no one was inside. He glanced at the empty bed, then at the floor. Said nothing. We checked the rest of the 4th floor. No missing patients, no reports of a child wandering off. Back at the station, I still felt uneasy. I pulled up the security footage. The feed from 403 was completely black. Not even the moment the lights turned on had been recorded. I checked the patient logs. Sure enough, 403 had been unoccupied this month. But last month, there was a name: Amy Hall, 8 years old. Congenital heart defect. Stayed for 2 weeks. Died in early December. I closed the file. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Maybe a cleaner's kid wandered in. Maybe I was just tired. You see weird things in hospitals, especially at night. At 1 a.m. the alert went off again. Room 403. This time I didn't call security. I grabbed a flashlight and went myself. The 4th floor was just as quiet, but the hum of the AC now pulsed unevenly, like it was struggling. The door to 403 was ajar again, and the light inside was already on. She was there, sitting at the edge of the bed. She turned to look at me, and this time I saw her clearly. Her face was pale, eyes wide, lips ringed in white like she'd just drunk milk. I didn't move, didn't speak. She smiled briefly, the kind of smile that slips out by accident. Then she stood up, walked to the window, pressed her finger against the glass and started drawing in the fog. I followed. She drew a Christmas tree simple, with a few round dots like ornaments. "Are you cold?" I asked. She nodded. Then she turned and walked toward the door. I thought she was leaving, but she stopped in the doorway and pointed to the bed. I walked over. On the pillow, there was a card, a handmade Christmas card drawn in red ink. A crooked little heart and clumsy handwriting. "Thank you for letting me stay here for the holidays." I turned back to the door. She was gone. I sat there for a while before turning off the light and leaving the room. Snow had started falling outside. On Christmas morning, the hospital was quieter than usual. Laura made coffee and gave me a cup. A box of donuts appeared on the desk, with a tiny candle stuck in the middle. No one claimed it. I opened the drawer to grab a pen and found the card again, the one from the night before. I hadn't put it there. I had no idea when it showed up. The door to 403 didn't open by itself again. No more alerts. I went upstairs to check once more. The room was neat and clean. The fog on the window had long faded, but faint on the glass, barely there, were the smudged outlines of a child's fingers, a Christmas tree.